For those of you who don't know me, my name is Megan. I'm the Director of Programs here at the museum. Thank you all for being here. Really appreciate it. This is one of the last programs of our series of speakers in conjunction with the Keyanna 2 exhibition. We have aimed here to couple this exhibit with programming to dive deeper into the stories that really matter to us. So this is kind of I'm glad that you're all here today to hear it. Tonight we're discussing the 1979 tailings disposal dam breach at United Nuclear Corporation's Church Rock Mill. That spill released 1,100 tons of uranium mill tailings and 94 million gallons of radioactive and acidic wastewater into the Cooper River. So that was the largest release of radioactive material by volume in the country, very quickly after 3 Mile Island, which many folks probably have already heard about. So tonight we're going to learn about that. I'm here to welcome Keyanna and Chris Shuey. Terry is a member of the Redwater Pond Road Community Association and a former resident of a community exposed of the largest additional uranium mines on the Navajo Nation and a uranium mill tailings disposal facility. Chris is an environmental health specialist who has worked in and with Navajo and Pueblo communities on uranium mining impacts since the late 70s and currently serves as director of the Uranium Impact Assessment Program at the Southwest Research and Information Center in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So it's an honor to host you both here tonight. Please give me a warm welcome.
You're reading on.
So, as you heard, my name is Keyanna, but it says Teracita Keyanna there. That's my government name. And people have a hard time pronouncing it sometimes, so I just go with Terry. And I know it looks odd, me kind of just being there nonchalant against that post right at the corner of one of the waste piles that we have there in this location. This location here is all the waste from the mine that we used to sit here, and that was owned by Kermit. This is sitting right in our community, and that specific area is actually about right here, just to give you an idea. So we can go to the next slide. And I just wanted to show you what I'll be going over. Just give you a brief introduction to the community, how it was around the mines, what community challenges we face, any kind of donation update we work with or don't work with, and just some citizen science that we do with partnership with Southwest Research Information Center and also UNM Metals and basically the whole health and science of UNM. So next slide. Oh wait, hold on, go back. This young man here is actually sitting right there. That's my son. His name is Craven Keyanna, and this was an opportunity for him to speak for his generation. And he was speaking to the nuclear regulatory commissioners who actually came out of their turtle boxes and actually came out to our community, and they got to experience what the community experiences in April, May, and those are the high winds. And so they actually got to see how the dust blows, and there was actually a mine on the other side right here. So we're sandwiched, our community is sandwiched between 2 uranium mines, and we're half a mile away from a mill, and so they got to experience the same dust that we get to experience all our lives, basically. So go ahead and go to the next slide. And this is the gate to that mine that you saw me just hanging out by. It's called the Quivira mine. That one is now Quivira mine. Used to be owned by Kermit. And so these signs that you see were never there before. This gate was barely even closed. For my generation, we didn't know. There was no signage. We didn't know. And so from there, we didn't know what dangers were actually lurking. And the US EPA and also GE, who is the current owner of the other mine that we reside next to. That one was called the United Nuclear Corporation, that had the tailing spill happen on their property. And so they actually said that we weren't there before, and so we actually had to track down our homesteads for over 100 years in this location. And that was through owning livestock paperwork that we have with Navajo Nation. They're the ones that really set the precedent of who was here in the community, because we had to have what they call a grazing permit. And so with that, we were actually able to prove that we were there with even their own paperwork. So that's just something that we wanted to let you know. And then the industry started coming around in the 50s, and that was during my grandmother, my late grandmother, Catherine Duncan, who actually fought to try to get the corporation to not move into the community by going to chapter meetings, and those are basically kind of like town hall meetings. And so with that, she would tell the leadership that she didn't want uranium mining in the community, but her voice was not heard. And also my great grandmother, the late Bessie Duncan, she used to actually pull out her survey stakes to help prevent the uranium industry coming into the community. But as you can see from what you see here now, is that it was not listened to. Nobody really regarded anything that anybody said in the community back then. And so let's go on to the next one. And so with this one, it just kind of shows you how the waste is in our community. These little boxes actually represent our homes. And then this here is where all of the waste here on this Northeast Church Rock mine site, which is owned by United Nuclear Corporation, now GE. They want to move the waste from here onto this site here, and that's their solution, is to just move it across over the, is it the state highway?
Yes.
Yeah, so this here, right here, is the state highway that they're just gonna move it over, so it's still off of the reservation, but no longer near the reservation, but it's on their property. And so the other site that you saw me pictured by is this area here. And this one is proposed for a move to the Northeast Regional Waste Disposal Authority. People in the Through area, they've actually said that they wanted to help, and so they opened up pieces of their property to develop a repository, and that's something that is just in the proposed state still. That is what the community is working on. And we've lived in this community, and these mines moved in here in the 60s, and community has dealt with different types of uranium side effects. We have respiratory illnesses, we have autoimmune diseases, we have cancers, we do have dermatology type of issues, even today. And so the oldest one is probably 78.
Carnegie started in 72 and
Yeah,
UNC in 68.
yeah, no, like how many people, but then also the youngest one who's suffering from health illnesses is 11, if you know it. And so that's kind of just shows you that even though people say that it's safe to be around and you can eat off of it, there's these dangers that we're simply seeing still to this day, and that's all the way from the 1960s to present. And it just tells you how unsafe these type of mines are, and how they continue to just be a nuisance on your body, on your livelihood. And we no longer are able to even have livestock in these areas, because why would you keep your livestock if it's part of your livelihood? If you use the wool, if you utilize the cattle for selling, things like that, you couldn't do it anymore, because the EPA stated that these things were no longer viable because you can't sell a radiated sheet. So, next slide. And so this is just how it was living around the mines. You can see in the 1940s, we just had open range, our kids, our animals, everything was just out in the open. And just real freedom, honestly. And so this was, like I said before, my late great grandmother Bessie Duncan would take out the survey stakes, and then my grandmother would take her words, and it still wasn't her, but there's a picture of her up on the top with her little brother. I believe that is Benny. His name is Benny Duncan, the late Benny Duncan. And then when I was a child, like I said, there was no signage like you see here. It was just open. There was no fencing as well. And so when I was a child, I used to follow the sheep. We would follow the sheep, and they would just go anywhere, even onto the mine sites that I didn't know was a danger. That some of my other cousins, anybody that was around my generation or younger, was going into these areas, not knowing that there was any type of danger to their health or anything like that. And so, like I said, we played and farmed in this picture here. Further back onto the east side of that location, we used to have a community farm. We used to grow corn, we used to grow beans, any kind of crops that my grandmothers and grandparents wanted to try and see if they could grow it. And so they would always try something new. And that actually used to have runoff from the mine. They would de-water the mine, and that runoff would go alongside our cornfield. And so I don't know if we've ever done a study on that actual site in that area, but that's something that my community wants to go back to be able to go back into farming and utilizing the Mother Earth the way we were supposed to. And so, how it says here that we now suffer those traumas of relocation. My husband and one of my uncles are one of the rare two people that I know that have been removed from their homes twice. Both of them are from the Bennett Freeze area, where Navajo and Hopi had a land freeze where nobody could do anything to the land, and they had to move away. And so my husband and my uncle were both part of it, and then they moved here, and then we were then again relocated. And so those two are very rare people that have to deal with that ordeal twice. And now we also look at the health issues and the loss from the health issues that we've had to just kind of deal with, and the loss of culture and our identity, because before the mines were there, we used to harvest our herbs, we used to harvest everything from the land organically, and so now we can no longer do that, and so that's something that we've lost as a community and as a people. The next slide. So this is our community challenges. We deal with other communities sometimes having to miscommunicate different types of information. Sometimes they know the information, or sometimes they're just giving out the wrong information because they haven't really educated themselves, or they just don't want to bother really, I guess pushing that, the education themselves and being able to share that kind of information. So we've dealt with miscommunication, misinformation. And GE, the larger portion of the map, that shows the GE property, and that waste pile there was actually postponed because there was litigation between the lawyers, and so that whole thing was postponed for a while, and supposedly it's supposed to be moving forward soon again, but we don't know. And And, as I mentioned, we're working on a repository for the Corvera mine site, which was the one that I would petrified, but the challenges are now that Navajo Nation is pushing back, and that's the Navajo Nation EPA. And it kind of confuses us because before, when we were just starting out, we would ask the Navajo Nation to be present in our meetings, and they would never show up. And now that we actually found a solution and trying to move forward and have some type of forward movement with what's going on in our community, now the Navajo Nation wants to push back, and so it's really hard. But they've actually partnered up with another technology. It's called DISA Technologies. It's a corporation, and they do ablation, which is just another type of mining, and so that it's water intensive. And as you know, we live in the desert, so I don't know where they're planning on getting all this water, and that's a proposed idea that they're gonna be trying to move forward, it feels like. Now, also still in the community, just a little further down the road from us. And so that's something that we're trying to deal with, and the community did not give consent for that, but they're still moving forward. And with the DISA technology, whatever waste comes from there, they did state that it will go to the White Mesa Energy Fuels mill. And we, as a community, have said that we don't want anything to go to that mill because we want that mill to get closed down as well. And so we stand in solidarity with the community out there who are impacted, who are the White Mesa community. Next slide. And these are just the dangerous conditions of the Corvera mine site. This is, they just built this $1 million, $1 million bridge basically. And we've always stated that they don't know our erosion issues, they don't know how it, and when I say they, I'm talking about the US EPA. They didn't want to listen to the community, and if you're working for any kind of corporation and you know the land and you know the world in your little spot more than anybody else, you're an expert, and don't let anybody ever tell you that you're not. But this is where our expertise as a community knew that this area has a really bad runoff, and that anything that they're gonna do is just gonna get eroded, and that's what happened. Our $1 million bridge started to crack. There are $1,000 boulders that were supposed to help stop the erosion, just flew right down the arroyo, and so we ended up with, just $1 million good-looking type of bridge. But I don't know what's gonna happen, because when they do remove the waste, I don't know if they're gonna have to redo this whole bridge again. So it's a waste of money, and so this is what our community has to deal with. And this shows you. This just shows another side view from the west side looking east. Where our community sits is just south of that. And then this is actually my aunt and uncle's home. And so that shows you just how close the proximity is to the waste that they have there. And it looks nice and neat because whenever we do have any type of functions, that's when the US EPA will come over and make it look pretty so that it looks like we're doing something. And so it just kind of, it just shows you what they're willing to just show you on top, but not really tell you the truth of what's going on. There's still an erosion issue. You can still see the lines coming down. You can see how steep it is. And this property actually used to just be kind of level and downward. It wasn't an actual hill, so that's how much waste they had brought up, because there was a mine shaft in this location, and I don't know how deep it was, but that's, next slide. And so, like I mentioned, with the Navajo Nation, we've had recent meetings with the director, who is Stephen Atitti for the Navajo Nation EPA. They state that they want to listen to the community, but they're not. We've We've always told them that we wanted the waste to be removed, and they never helped us, and now they've actually used our own words against us and said, well, you guys didn't do anything about it. And so that just tells you how our own leadership thinks of its communities in these type of hazardous areas and these type of situations. And so now, I'm not sure when he decided to drink the Kool-Aid, but he used to actually be one of our champions. And then now he's actually more of a champion for the dissect technology, and he wants to move forward with the ablation process, which we're against in our community. And so this is supposed to be a pilot project that they're using in our own community, so it's something that they haven't done at that scale yet. They've only done it in a very, very small scale, and they said that they did wonders with it, but if you really look at the numbers, you know, they're not cleaning anything. They're making it look like it, and that's basically kind of how the health department sees diabetes. They tell us dilution is the solution. Is kind of the same concept here, is how they're utilizing the water, I believe. That's kind of just how I feel about it. So next slide. And so this is a community science, citizen science that we do with partnership with Fishui and UNM. And we make posters, and I presented on these posters. These posters kind of have just the history, and then what we do. This is time critical removal actions that they've done in our community, because they found out that the uranium contamination was more immediate to the homes, and they had to move the communities out and clean up around their homes. And they've done that 4 different times. The road that leads into the Cobera mine, we didn't know was highly radiated. I used to walk that road every day, morning and evening, because that was the way to my school bus, and I didn't know, I didn't realize that I was getting radiated every single day. And so that was some news that I found out when they started doing the cleanup. And I don't know if you guys have gotten to be in this museum and got to see the video here on the box here. But there's a little video here that actually tells you the story about the sheep that we had butchered, and the entirety of its contents was like a tinted yellow, just like the sign here. And so that kind of just shows you what kind of dangers were in our community because of the vegetation being impacted. When the vegetation was impacted, it impacted the animals. And so we no longer could grow crops, we couldn't have our livestock, we couldn't gather the water anymore, we couldn't use the soil, and even the air was impacted because then all of the dust from one mine site would blow into our community. And then on top of that, we had runoff from here on this side. So this is a picture from the Cobera mine site into the United Nuclear Corporation side. And the water would run off from this side into an arroyo and go down this arroyo. And Chris can probably tell you a little story about that because it's very fascinating. But this young man, he is graduated now. And that just tells you how long it's been since he's really gotten to be at home as well. He's been kind of moved around here and there and never really got to go back home as well since that picture. And we also have other community actions that we've done. My aunt has spoken at the Waxman hearing. I've spoken with the Human Rights Commission. I've actually gone to the United Nations for a while. And so these are the things that we continue to do as a community. And next slide, please.
If you folks have questions for Terry, you can ask them while I figure out.
Yeah,
Go from there.
We went and at the museum, we went over and toured the White Mesa Mill in October to see what they had going on. Just out of curiosity to stay up to date. And we were learning that the Navajo Nation had passed legislation to allow trucking of uranium across, which was news to us at the time. It sounds like that's in deep contrast to the community members around the area. Could you talk more about, their process of, like, were they consulting with community members about that decision, or was that just something that they decided to do by themselves?
No, this was an action that they did on their own. We've been having issues as a community, but not just as a community, but as a people with our Navajo Nation leadership currently, because they had these different meetings without communities involved, and they just moved forward with these actions. And so a lot of these things were done without community input, without community concerns. And quite frankly, I feel like our Navajo government, our Navajo Nation president, is basically in that pot of profit over people right now.
Thank you.
It's interesting the contrast between this and communities around our area. Down in Monticello, they did a survey of the town and found out that a lot of the tailings from their mill there was used in construction all through their town. And so many homes were taken cleared out of the ground, and they everything around that their home and everything was hauled off and wherever they put it with it. But anyway, then they came back and rebuilt their homes at no cost to the homeowner. And this was also done over in Grand Junction. They had used that dirt in building up land and using it as refill all over the Grand Junction area. And the same thing, they went in and searched those areas, and they were remediated, and whatever was there was replaced. I think it's very, very apparent the separation between what was done here and what you've had to do with.
Yeah, and we say the ugly word, environmental racism. A lot of times, communities such as mine are dealing with it for decades and decades, and with no actual outcome. And we do see that, and we use Moab as an example of how a disaster it took an act of Congress for this place to get cleaned up, and yet nobody is willing to do the same thing for an indigenous community, let alone a smaller community such as the White Mesa Utah community, because their community of 300, nobody really wants to listen to them. They're impacted, their water's impacted, their children are suffering, the people are suffering, but nobody wants to listen. The same with our community, but the only reason why our community is pretty unique is that we actually decided to turn ourselves into a grassroots organization. And that has been the biggest step forward for our community, because we decided to do that. And when we did that, that gave us an opportunity to actually get our foot into some of these government doors, because before, as private citizens, we were not able to do that. So that's one of the unique things about our community.
Well, here in Moab, if you're here any time of year round, you'll notice where the mill sits, right there at the mouth of that canyon going into Arches.
Yeah.
And believe me, the wind blows. It blew south from north, and it blew across the river. So of course, I'm sure the river's lit up somewhere down there. But anyway, and it was less than 5 miles away from our school. And so I've lived here all my life, and personally, we haven't had any problem with it that we know of yet. I don't know how long you have to live to show up, but anyway, I think there was a high impact here In fact, I remember the time when there were trucks driving up and down the road with Geiger counters and going into people's yard because miners had taken high-grade uranium, because it's kind of pretty, you know, had taken it and was using it for rock decoration in their yard. They came in and stripped all that out and took it away. So it just shows again the inequality.
Yeah. Well, thank you for recognizing that. Do you have a question? Okay.
Well, can I ask you, who drove the cleanup here and in Colorado? Was it the state EPA or was it federal EPA?
You know, I really don't know. But I know it was,
The county really works hard at it.
It can.
It was the Department of Energy drove a lot of that, that's
Yeah.
why it was the Department of Energy here, and they had offsite tailings cleanup, they did reviews and removed material. But, and the Department of Energy cleaned up over in Monticello also.
But it wasn't until the California congressional delegation, when, oh my goodness, the river flows from the Atlas Mill to California, and they got involved. That's when the EPA went, oh, maybe we need to take this seriously.
People downstream
Yeah,
start getting angry and serious.
that is a public,
What can we do to help support your community?
A lot of times it's just spreading the word and helping educate more people about the issues that are happening in our community, but also sometimes calling senators and saying, hey, you know, why are you allowing this to continue to happen? Why are your people in your state continuing to suffer? Those are the things that probably is the only thing that will help us right now, because a lot of the movement now is based on the government right now, and so right now it's at a standstill. We're just really lucky that we actually have somebody in the EPA that is actually ahead in one of the projects that's ongoing, and he's still able to hold on to his job currently, and so we're hoping that he's able to stay with our community and continue to be a help from the US EPA standpoint. But right now, we don't have a nomination either. They're giving us pushback, so even calling nomination to find out like what's going on. Why are you guys saying it's okay for Keyanna mine to transport on the nomination? Why are you transporting into another indigenous community? I thought you were supposed to be in solidarity with other indigenous communities. Is probably the best way to do that.
is there a Redwater Pond Road chapter?
No, but we do sit on. It's funny because where our community sits is kind of hard for our own chapter to help, and because it's over the mesa, it's away from everybody else. Where we sit right on the corner, almost like the Four Corners, and so if you know how hard it is to get anything done on the Four Corners, because of different litigations, different land statuses, the same thing happens with the nomination, and we sit right on 4 different chapters. We sit close to Naudishki, we sit close to Church Rock, we sit close to Pineville. We're right there by Coyote Canyon, and Coyote Canyon is actually our chapter, and then Standing Rock. So there's 5 chapters that kind of go right there in the area, and it's really hard to get any help from our chapter because of that. And one time when I remember this when I was younger, that it actually said that, well, when you get it cleaned up and you get a big settlement, you remember the chapter. And I was like, really, this is how you feel. And so it's always been about money, and so we've always been treated like that redheaded stepchild from our chapter, and so we've actually had to get help from other chapters. And so even with just grading roads or getting water, things like that, we've actually had to go to different chapters just to request for help. So kind of hard. Thank you guys.